Now is 10:41. We're going to send it out to Studio 61, where Tim Lammers is with a local author sending a really important message to people, Tim.
Yes, that book is called Connecting the Disconnect. It's time to try to fix the symbiotic relationship between a community and the law enforcement officers who help protect and serve that community. And specifically, we want to talk about Hartford because I'm happy to have the book's author, Michael Francis, who spent 21 years with the Hartford Police Department before retiring in 2020. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today.
Thank you, Tim.
A pleasure to meet you. Thank you for your 21 years of service in the capital city here. But talk to me about, you're not the first person we've had to talk on police community relations, how to strengthen them at a time where they're very trying. You're the first one, though, who's written a book about it. Why did you decide to write a book?
Well, it came from just one engagement I had years ago, an approach I had with an officer, and it wasn't friendly. I was left with demeaning names and so forth, and it was very hurtful. And I said to myself, it can't be like that. There's no way it can be like that. We have to find a way out to channel this emotion that individuals are feeling that they carry on board as an officer, and then display that attitude to an individual because it spreads. It's like a virus. So I decided to take the path of joining the police force to make a difference in my own way. And I wrote this book to collect my footprint, in order so that others could see how to engage and make the society a little bit better.
What did you see in your 21 years, specifically towards the latter end, that was a big impetus for writing this book?
I think it's a lot of rejection and policing. The society kind of like shift somewhat. The energy changed, and it was more collectively. People kind of like engage officers in a lot of ways that was really not acceptable. And it becomes a two-pronged situation. You have individual officers who kind of like are not strong enough to deal with the conflict that they engage.
Right.
And you have individuals out there who doesn't even take time to understand one another. So I see there's a disconnect there. People are not engaging and having a conversation as which is necessary to bridge this gap.
Yeah, it just seems like, and again, I'm just speaking anecdotally here, there's a two-way erosion of trust, that people are starting to trust the police officers less, and police officers themselves, they're getting called names. They're being called racist. They're being called pigs. They're being spit on sometimes just for showing up at a particular scene. And these are stories I've heard firsthand too. That makes it doubly tricky to try to sort of find common ground that needs to be found. So, I mean, obviously, we're talking about something we can talk about for 5 months here. Right. But what are those first steps that both sides can take to try to find some common ground?
Well, it's individual. Honestly, it is. Because I have had situations where when I'm out of uniform and I approach an officer, the contact is extremely abrasive. You know, if I walk up to someone and I said, like, during an incident, I recall walking to an officer just to ask for a direction. The officer was a little bit abrasive and I guess it's because it's kind of I would say kind of a stigma. It's kind of like something that is just plastered, where the officers are not focusing on the individual, and so is the community. The community needs to stop focusing on the officers collectively and get to know individual officer, get to talk to people, get to know, you know what I mean? And that way you can have a dialogue.
Seeing past the badge.
Correct.
Now, I've heard some people say that one of the biggest ways to do that is to make sure that the people policing a community come from that community. I think that's easier said than done, though, isn't it?
It is, because in a general, we're trying to find the best and most suitable person who are aligned with common sense. It's not just the community, but it's really more than just a job. It has to be a person. Okay, it's your personality that makes you a great officer, not exactly where you're from, really. Okay. It's just how you look at things. You have to look at things with fairness and take a balanced approach, and not look at people as title. Look at them as human being, person.
Mr. Francis, we're almost out of time, but what else will people find in that book that maybe they weren't expecting to find in that book?
Well, you know, in most books, I've always said there is a genre. This is really not a genre. It's for everyone. Police, law enforcement, any individual who wants to look into. It's thought-provoking, and they'll find information about how to interact, how to engage themselves, and how to balance this approach and deal with society on an equal level, fair level, and honest level.
And where can people get it?
It's available online at Barnes & Noble and on Amazon.com.
Amazon and Barnes & Noble, connecting the disconnect. Thank you so much for your service to the city that we all love, the city I was born in as well. And thank you so much for doing what you can to try to repair a lot of these relationships that have gotten fractured over the years.
Thank you, sir.
We do appreciate it.
It's a pleasure.
Thank you so much,
Thank
Mr.
you.
Francis.